there now. You don't even know you're going onto an island sometimes. So back in the 1800s, of course, there wasn't a tourist in sight, and did a bit of sheep farming to keep them going, but nothing to write home about. So to bring a bit of extra income into the island for the winter months, the young people of Achill and those who were fit and willing and able, they would head over to Scotland to work there for the summer season on the potato farms. They became known as the tatty hawkers. So you'd have the smaller fishing boats, the hookers, and sometimes the yawls. They'd sail around to Achill and they collect the folk there and they bring them up here to this point of the bay, and it's here they'd meet the steamships that'd take them off to England and also to Scotland. We're a little bit more connected than we are now today here in this harbour. So it was 14th of June in 1894, and instead of the 6 boats that would normally be in operation for this service, there was only 3 on duty this day for whatever reason. And these young people, it was their only chance to get off the island for the summer, so they felt they had no choice. They all piled into these 3 hookers. Now technically they were overloaded, but they did all right, remarkably. There was 124 in the Victory, it was, that ended up capsizing. When the SS Elm came into view here, I suppose it was a mixture of their excitement and their naivety. They all rushed over to the one side of the hooker that they were in to get a closer look, which was a bad idea, unfortunately. It said as well that the ballasts in the middle of these hookers were taken out so they could fit more people on. So that just added to the tragedy, didn't it? Health and safety, I suppose, wasn't such a big thing back then. So between that and a gust of wind, they called it a freak gust of wind, because by all accounts it was a calm June day. The Victory had capsized. Now there was a lot of young people caught under the sails of this hooker, and there was in fact 32 people lost their souls here that day. Now a massive rescue operation took place from the quayside. Ironically, the first of our Coast Guard stations is just here now to our right. Pigeon Point, it's built on the headland there called Pigeon Point. So the bodies of those who were deceased were brought in and laid out where there was an empty warehouse there now, where the hotels and apartments are. Well, basically, I suppose the Westport Achill railway line was under construction at this point, so they had the tracks laid down at this stage, but there was no stations built. So a special train was put on by the Great Western Railway to accommodate bringing these young people back to Achill for burial. Now this happened to be the first journey on this new railway line, if you can imagine that. Now, even more tragic as well, a lot of the siblings of those who had died here that day still departed for Scotland on the SS Elm later on that evening that it was due to go, but very hard times. Now it gets a little bit spooky. Well, I suppose there was another tragedy involving the tatty hawkers from Achill. This group was almost 40 years later. This group had made it to a place in Scotland called Kirkintilloch near Glasgow, and they were staying in these stone barns overnight, these stone cabins known as bothies. Now for whatever reason they separated the girls into one and the boys into another, and they locked these cabins at night. But a fire broke out in the lads' cabin, and there was 10 young men from Achill lost their lives in this tragedy. Now again their bodies had to be brought home for burial, but at this point in time the Westport Achill railway line had in fact just closed 2 years previously. So yet again another special train was put on to continue the journey from Dublin. It would have come from Dublin to Westport and then on again to Achill, and this happened to be the final journey on this new line. Now this is where it gets spooky. Well, it was all the way back in the 17th century. There was a man from Erris in North Mayo by the name of Brian Rua O'Carrowan. He was sort of a mystic and a bit of a poet, and he had prophesied that the first and last carriages travelling on an iron road emitting smoke and fire will carry corpses to Achill, and so it came to be all these years later. Isn't that some spooky stuff now? There's no cheating destiny, folks, is there? Now there is a monument there, you will have all noticed it, I'd imagine, beside the pond there at the quayside, with all the names of those who died here in the Achill disaster. And of course just there back on the 14th of June we commemorated the 130th anniversary of this awful tragedy, and there was a lovely ceremony here at the quayside. You had the Coast Guard out, and the priest was out, of course, to say a few prayers, and the Achill Pipe Band were there as well. So lovely to commemorate them, but what an awful tragedy. And thank God things have got easier for the Achill people. And of course now we can enjoy that lovely railway line by hopping on our bikes. I'm sure we do it every day. Well, we did it for the first while. That's going over 12 years now, isn't it? It's going a long time, yeah. So it's a lovely amenity to have, of course. Now we're just sailing into an area that's generally pretty high with seal activity. So if I didn't depress